Sacramento, late 1977. The city wore the uneasy coat of a nation unsettled, fractured by Vietnam's lingering shadow, rattled by political scandals, and gripped by a restless undercurrent of distrust. Neighborhoods, usually alive with the hum of everyday life, now held their breath behind locked doors and curtained windows. The post-war American dream felt tarnished, frayed at the edges by economic uncertainty and a rising tide of social isolation. In quiet corners of the city, people whispered about the unexplainable, strange lights slicing through the night sky, rumors of clandestine government operations, paranoia twisting the edges of reality for those who could not hold fast. The lines between fact and fantasy blurred easily, fertile ground for delusions to take root. Amid this fragile backdrop lived Richard Trenton Chase, a man marked by invisible wounds no one dared to name aloud, a mind unraveling in the shadows, haunted by spectral fears of stolen blood and clandestine death rays. He wandered the city's outskirts like a ghost, a pale figure cloaked in an orange ski parka that stood in stark contrast to the muted, wary world around him. Sacramento, a city struggling to reclaim its safety, would soon discover that beneath the surface of this restlessness lurked something far darker, a predator whose monstrous hunger defied explanation, one who believed salvation lay in the blood of others. The evening air was thick with a silence that seemed to clutch at the bones of the quiet suburban street. Inside a modest house on Marywood Drive, Evelyn Maroth moved about her home, a sense of ordinary life cloaking the space. Distant laughter from a child, the gentle hum of a refrigerator, the faint scent of evening dinner simmering. Unseen eyes watched. Richard Chase stepped through the threshold, slipping past the fragile barrier of safety without resistance. His mind, fractured and spiraling, barely tethered to the moment, registered the scene in fragmented waves, bloodlust interlaced with desperation. The first encounter came near the door. Dan Meredith, Evelyn's longtime friend, a man burdened by his own mortal frailty as he battled a brain tumor, suddenly caught in the cold path of Chase's rifle. 2 shots echoed, muffled by the walls but resonating in the stillness, the grim punctuation of a fate sealed. Then Evelyn, the mother, the protector, caught in a waking nightmare as the gun's final call silenced her protest. Her 6-year-old son, Jason, nearby, and her toddler nephew, David Ferreira, too young to grasp the nightmare that had entered their home. Chase's hands, trembling yet resolute, moved with a surgeon's coldness and a madman's frenzy. A knife from the kitchen, the instrument of unspeakable violation, met flesh. The house filled with the unspoken horror of mutilation, the space between sanity and madness narrowing with every stab. In the muted chaos, the world outside pressed in. 6-year-old Tracy Grangard knocked on the front door, her innocent expectation unaware of the carnage beyond. Chase, startled and unmoored, snatched the baby, vanishing into the night with the stolen child's body, a shadow dissolving into the dark. Later, in the solitude of his apartment, the madness deepened. The child's head was severed, the gray matter consumed, an act born not of hunger alone, but of a twisted logic, survival through blood and flesh. Richard Trenton Chase's killings unfolded with a chilling randomness beneath the surface of Sacramento's quiet neighborhoods, yet a sinister pattern pulsed beneath the chaos. His hunting grounds were not sprawling forests or shadowed alleyways, but the intimate spaces of domestic life. Homes unlocked by complacency or trust, where ordinary people carried out mundane rituals of family and rest. His victims were varied, yet united by vulnerability. A pregnant woman preparing to dispose of the day's refuse, a devoted mother babysitting her son and nephew, a kindly friend trapped in the wrong place at the wrong time. Chase's method was brutal, but marked by a grim consistency, shooting first to silence, then moving through a grotesque ritual of mutilation and defilement. He left behind no subtle footprints. Instead, his acts echoed a chaotic mind unrestrained by logic or shame. He wore gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, but made no attempt to clean the blood that stained his clothes and skin. Neighbors reported glimpses of a disheveled figure in an orange ski parka, blood-stained and hollow-eyed, wandering the streets with aimless purpose. His madness was a dark mosaic of delusions, a desperate quest to replenish a body ravaged by imagined ailments. Chase believed he was a victim of stolen blood, hunted by invisible death rays from the skies, plagued by a poisoned circulatory system. To survive, he drank blood, human and animal alike, driving him further into a nightmarish spiral where the line between predator and victim dissolved. The physical evidence bore the marks of his torment and ritual. At his apartment, investigators uncovered walls and floors soaked in blood, the spoils of his grotesque feasts. Animal collars mingled with human remains. Brains preserved in jars sat beside classified ads for dog sales. His madness found form in these fragments, a macabre shrine to a mind unraveling. The FBI's psychological profile painted a portrait of a deeply disturbed young man, plagued by psychosis and alienation. Chase's mental illness manifested in paranoid delusions, erratic behaviors, and a fractured sense of reality. Yet within this chaos lay cold calculation, a disturbing blend of impulse and planning. He moved with a peculiar blend of disorganized frenzy and purposeful intent. He was both hunted and hunter, the embodiment of a violent psychosis that turned the ordinary into the grotesque and the familiar into a place of terror. The shadow of Richard Chase's crimes stretches far beyond the blood-soaked floors and shuttered rooms of Sacramento's quiet homes. His story is not only one of depravity and madness, but also a haunting reflection on society's failures, a stark reminder of the fragile boundary between hidden torment and public tragedy. In the cold corridors of justice, Chase was tried and condemned. Though ravaged by paranoid schizophrenia and delusions that consumed his every thought, he was deemed fit to stand trial. His defense wrestled with the impossible question: could a man so profoundly broken understand the weight of his actions? The jury's verdict was unyielding: 6 counts of first-degree murder and a sentence to die in the gas chamber. Behind bars, Chase remained a figure of terror and despair. Fellow inmates feared him, prison officials grappled with his psychosis, and mental health professionals questioned whether a man so unmoored from reality belonged in the penal system at all. His mind was a storm, conjuring conspiracies of UFOs and Nazi persecution, speaking of stolen arteries and invisible enemies. On a winter morning in December 1980, Richard Chase was found dead in his cell. An overdose of medication, whether a final act of control or a desperate plea for peace, silenced the Vampire of Sacramento at just 30 years old. The papers he left behind, scrawled with cryptic codes and messages, hinted at a fractured soul still caught between delusion and lucid despair. The wounds he inflicted ripple through the lives of his victims' families and the community, a grim echo of lost innocence and fractured trust. Yet, in the cold light of reflection, Chase's crimes challenge us to confront the darkest corners of the human psyche and the limits of compassion and understanding. In a world where violence often wears 1,000 masks, the tale of Richard Trenton Chase remains a cautionary testament, not just to the horror one man can unleash, but to the complexity of mental illness and the urgent need to recognize its signs before tragedy takes hold. And in the stillness that follows, one is left with the stark, haunting image of a man who drank blood to stay alive, and in doing so, became a monster. In the quiet that follows such horror, what remains is not just the shattered lives or the blood-stained rooms, but the echoes of a fractured mind, lost in its own darkness. Richard Chase was more than a monster. He was a mirror held up to a society that looked away, a soul consumed by shadows no light could reach. His crimes force us to confront uncomfortable truths, the fragile boundaries between sanity and madness, the silent suffering hidden behind closed doors, and the heavy cost when those cries go unheard. In the end, the true horror is not only in the acts themselves, but in the void left behind, where innocence was stolen, and where the line between human and nightmare blurred forever.